So in this lesson, we have an introduction to multi-international domain setups. International SEO is a very complex topic with so many different aspects to it. In this course, we mostly talked about Google so far. We covered how Google does certain things and how Google evaluates websites regarding SEO, etc. However, this is really a very limited picture. Granted, of course, globally Google is the biggest player in the world, but there are other search engines as well that are active in certain markets and regions. You have to pay attention to those as well as to be successful on a global scale. For example, Baidu is super important in China. The same is true for Yandex in Russia, for example. Other relevant search engines, for example, are Bing, but also SEMrush and Naver. So, let's start and talk about keywords first. The big mistake that happens all the time is that people just try to simply translate keywords. Sure, all engines will start work and return results based on what you put in, but you're clearly missing out. When you just translate a keyword to another language, it might have a similar meaning without being exactly the same though. Also, by simply translating words, you miss out on synonyms. Depending on the language, there might be multiple words to describe the same thing. For example, the words car insurance has 3 different meanings and variations in Germany. If you just translate them, you'd be missing out on a significant amount of potential search traffic. As a side note, it's even more important to also understand cultural differences. There is, different perception of colors in many different cultures. These differences need to be considered while building local presences, crafting local ad copy, meta descriptions, etc. But since we're talking about technical SEO in this course, let's move on and cover domains in the context of international SEO. There are 2 different ways, or better said, eventually even 3, on how to serve internationally and use domains in that context. When you have different types of CC-TLDs, you could use top-level domains like domainname.fr or domainname.es, or you could also have a generic TLD that could be, for example, just domainname.com. With your .com, you can either decide to use country and language-specific folders on that .com domain, or similar to Wikipedia, you could do language-specific subdomains, for example. So using the generic top-level domain, you would have to select between either a subfolder or a subdomain, just depending on your needs. For country code top-level domains, there's a strong default geo-targeting. For example, Google takes the .fr and knows that it is supposed to rank in France. So differentiating from a technical perspective is relatively easy. Disadvantages are that you have to register everything in the respective local market, and that's really individually done. There are sometimes also legal restrictions, and in that worst case, that country code top-level domain is not even available anymore. In comparison, the biggest advantage of a generic top-level domain is that you do not have to mess around with different domains altogether. It's one single CMS that is more cost-effective to maintain and also to develop. And from an inbound linking perspective, all the links help strengthen this one .com domain rather than being split up and distribute link juice to all the different country code top-level domains instead. Also, the generic top-level domain probably already has some trust. It is way easier to pass this along into the subfolders as opposed to linking to your different country code top-level domains or even subdomains with each other. From an inbound linking perspective and the link equity, the global generic top-level domain approach is most efficient. You do not need any multi-site functionality, as would be the case with subdomains on a generic top-level domain. So my recommendation is to go for a .com as a generic top-level domain and then establish language and/or country-specific subfolders. Make sure you use the features that search engines provide. For example, Google has the ability in their Search Console to set up individual properties based on language or country directories. And then you can also do individual geo-targeting. In the past, there was always a problem of missing strong geo signals, but nowadays you can override it with Search Console, which really helps to target the region that you want. Also, make sure that you properly implement hreflang tags, which we'll be going to cover in one of the next lessons.